Hi, welcome to Take 5, a daily Bible time studying the New Testament by chapters. Today is June 8th and we're in Revelation 20. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Revelation 20, verse 15. The 20th chapter of Revelation is the picture of God's judgment of mankind, good and bad, righteous and evil. The 19th and 20th chapters must be read as one, for in the coming of Christ, there is the end of the beast and the false prophet, the devil's two henchmen, along with all the armies which had joined them for the battle of Armageddon. Of Christ the judge, we are told, from his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God, the Almighty. This verse begins its fulfillment as we read in the last verse of the previous 19th chapter, and the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. It finds its conclusion, that of ruling with a rod of iron, in this 20th chapter, as Christ begins a 1,000-year reign on earth. All of this works together, the seizing of the beast and the false prophet, and throwing them into the lake of fire, along with the binding of Satan for 1,000 years. It's interesting that the devil is described with the same term by which he had originally entered into mankind, as a serpent, the serpent of old, the one who has always used the tool of deception to trip up mankind. And now, in Satan's absence for a 1,000-year period, Christ will rule upon earth, accompanied by his saints. Hardly any detail is given here regarding how this will work. The word they sat upon thrones and judgment was given them, most likely refers to the armies that accompanied Christ from heaven, along with martyrs who had come through the period of tribulation. Verses 5 and 6 present difficulty as to exactly who is involved. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one who has a part in the first resurrection. Over these the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him for 1,000 years. In these verses it speaks of those who reign with Christ in this time as being part of the first resurrection. It is a blessing to be a part of this first resurrection, for those who are of it will not be subject to the second death. The second death will be seen at the conclusion of the chapter to be the judgment and damnation of those whose names are not recorded in the book of life. Paul asked the church at Corinth, "Or do you not know that the Lord's people will judge the world?" Which is described here in John's vision. For 1,000 years following the binding of Satan, there will be universal reign by Christ and his people. The question is asked at times why God doesn't do this, purge the world of sin and unrighteousness. For this millennial period, it will be done. Does it make a difference? Apparently not, for it must be the heart of mankind that is cleansed from sin, and not simply the removal of its outward influences. Following 1,000 years, the devil is once more released onto the earth, and we are told that he is able to quickly gain enough of a following that the apostle describes it being like the sand on the seashore. This time the devil leads a battle against the children of God who are on the earth, with God sending fire down to devour those who had followed the devil. It is now that comes the final judgment of the devil, as he is thrown into the lake of fire, where he and all disbelievers will be tormented forever. We now come to the second death. Books are opened. If your name is not found recorded, it is at this time that all those who refuse to receive God's gift of salvation are cast into the lake of fire. This is what salvation is primarily about. Not being blessed here on earth, but salvation from hell. There is not necessarily a certainty of lack of suffering here on earth, but there is the guarantee of heaven once death comes. And there should never be a putting off of matters of eternity, thinking that there is plenty of time to make things right. That type of guarantee is never given. Thanks for being here today. Now may God's grace and peace be ours as we seek to live our utmost for His highest. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.